give Iris a round of applause. A couple of announcements, then I'll tell you how tonight works. First up, first-timers for this program, anybody? Many of you. Excellent. Okay, so the way this... Excellent. We love to see that. We're so glad that so many people are here tonight. The way this works, we'll have a little informal conversation up here about biography and about the show that we're working on right now. If at any point you have a question, just raise your hand, be good and loud and patient, and we'll get to you, and we'll make this a conversation. We don't want to make this just a show about us up here. A couple of things coming up. Beaches, which we will talk about at length. The world premiere musical will be opening on the 18th of February, and then closes on March 30th. Get your tickets soon. I suspect it will be a hit. Other things coming up. We begin this week here's hoping. We are beginning this week our Winter Cabaret series, going out throughout the month. Artists include Tracy Lynn Oliveira, Carolyn Cole. We're doing next week the My Funny Valentine's concert series. We've got all kinds of great music going on upstairs. If you've never been to one of our cabarets, they're great. We set up tables in our smaller theater, have food, drinks, and people just sing beautifully for you. It's a lot of fun. And that's really all that I've got to announce this time around. So we'll start this conversation. I'll read a little bit of Iris's bio to embarrass her and to introduce you to her. Iris is a graduate of Carnegie Mellon University, where she... go for it. Where she received awards for writing the book and lyrics of 2 musicals with Stephen Schwartz, who we know is the writer of things like Wicked and Godspell.
That was after he got rid of me.
She's written for television, she's written for variety shows, sitcoms, miniseries, and she's written film scripts. She was the first female writer on the Sonny and Cher show. In 2010, she wrote the book and lyrics for the People in the Picture, the Tony-nominated musical. She wrote it with music by Mike Stoller and Artie, I can't read my own writing, last name, Butler, thank you. And so that's Iris. We are so glad that you are willing to take time out of your very busy schedule.
It is a busy schedule. I came running out of a rewrite meeting, and as soon as I finish here, I have to go upstairs and do my rewrite. So I got homework.
So I guess we'll start with a little biography. Where are you from?
I'm from Pittsburgh. I was a townie when I went to Carnegie. I lived at home, and I grew up in Pittsburgh. My father was a social worker at a settlement house called the Ari Kaufman Settlement that was in the Hill District, which was later made famous by August Wilson in all of his plays. And my brother had a hardware store in Squirrel Hill on Murray Avenue, and I worked in the hardware store. And then when I got into Carnegie, which was not easy to do, but I had to will myself into the drama department because we couldn't afford to send me away to school, so I just had to get in. And my brother used to drive me to school every day in a 59 Chevy Panther truck that had a sign on the side that said Ratner's, which is my real name. Ratner's delivers 55-gallon rubbish drums. And instead of that, Ratner was delivering me to Carnegie Tech in those days. And I went to Taylor Alderdice High School, Carnegie, and then about 2 weeks after graduation, I decided I would go to LA because I had a friend who was there, someone I'd grown up with, and I would go there for the summer. I was an acting major at Carnegie, and I was a terrible actress. I don't know how they kept me for all those years, but I thought, well, I'll go to LA for a few months, and then I will move to New York and try to act in the theater. And after I'd been in LA for a couple of months and thought how wonderful it is, it never rains here. Now I realize it's called drought. At the time, I thought, I really felt going from gray Pittsburgh to LA that I was like Dorothy opening the door into Oz. So I moved to LA and I just stayed there because I loved the weather, and I met the man who became my first husband. Then I tried acting in television. I got parts that were so small, my mother missed them going forward. My first role in TV was on an episode of The Fugitive. The part was so small that the name of my character was Another Co-ed. And it kind of went like that until I decided that maybe I'd try writing, and I met another woman who wanted to be a writer, and we started writing speculative scripts for TV shows, and sold them, sold a few of them.
Had you written before, or was this?
Well, at Carnegie, in my junior year, I went into the varsity show committee. The varsity show at Tech was called Scotch and Soda. I think it still is. And I said, I had this idea. I had no idea that people were submitting entire scripts and tapes of songs. I had an idea. I said, I have this idea, and here it is. And I presented it to them, and they said, we want that. So now I have to write it. So that summer, I was in summer stock. I spent 2 summers in Beach Haven, New Jersey at the Surflight Summer Theater, and my parts were so small that I would be the secretary on stage and pretending I was in the show, and I was actually writing my musical. So I got back to school in the fall of my junior year, and I got a phone call from a young freshman boy, and he said, hi, I know you wrote the book and the lyrics, but I'm a composer now, you need music, so could I meet you and play my music? And I said, wait, you're a freshman? I thought, I'm a big junior. Who needs a freshman? I said, sure, kid, I'll give you a break. When do you want to meet? And he told me, and I said, when we get to the call board, how will I know you? And he said, I look like a cross between Ringo Starr and Barbra Streisand. And he did, and it was Stephen Schwartz. And we wrote 2 musicals together, and then, as I said, I graduated, and as soon as he got rid of me, he wrote Godspell and Pippin. So I had written in college, and then I was in a comedy workshop with a bunch of other actors, and every time they needed a show, I would write the show. So I kind of knew that writing was my thing and not acting.
Okay.
And so I finally got a television agent. I'm not sure I'm telling this in the right order. And then, I know. The best part of the story actually is that I knew someone who sent me to meet Gary Marshall. And at the time, Gary had a company that was managing young writers, he and his dad and another friend, and they would sit with us over our scripts. And do you all know who Gary Marshall is, right? So he would look at our script and he'd say, so this is funny. This, on the other hand, is not so funny. He'd scratch it out. And he basically taught me how to write comedy. And so let's see. So then I wrote episodes of Love American Style and Odd Couple and some of those shows that he was involved in. And then somebody submitted a script of mine to George Schlatter, who was the producer of Laugh-In, and he was going to do an all-woman staff special, except for him. He was going to be the executive producer, but it was going to be a woman producer, a woman director, an all-woman staff show, and it was called The Shape of Things. And he hired me to be one of the writers. So the talent was Joan Rivers, Phyllis Diller, Valerie Harper, Lynn Redgrave, Lee Grant, and George Schlatter particularly liked a song that I wrote, a lyric for, and it was about a Jewish girl who falls in love with Henry Kissinger, who was then Secretary of State. And the line that captured George Schlatter's heart was when she says, I promise I'll keep every secret, I won't be a Yente, and maybe we could honeymoon a week in San Clemente. At any rate, they wanted that show to become a series. George Schlatter was basically jumping on the feminist bandwagon. It was the early 70s now, and the show did not make it. They ran it once. And then George Schlatter called me, and he said, I'm about to do 3 specials, is what they used to call them. One for Diana Ross, one for Doris Day, and one for Cher. Which one do you want to work on? And I said, oh, hands down, Cher. And it was during the time that Sonny and Cher had split up, and Sonny went out and did his own show, and it flopped. And then Cher did a big special, and it was starring Flip Wilson, Elton John, and Bette Midler, and that was the one that I worked on. And Fred Silverman, who was then the head of CBS, said, we want this show to go to series, and I was hired to be the only woman on the staff. So there were 12 guys and me in a room, and I had more fun than I can ever describe, to the point where I get to the end of the week and I'd say, I can't believe they're actually paying me to do this. If they knew I would do it for free, they'd probably take their money back. But anyway, so I had a fabulous time, and Cher was very tough, and all the guys were afraid of her, and they used to push me into her dressing room to find out what she wanted to talk about, because she would literally throw the script across the room sometimes. And that was 4 years on that show. And then in the meantime, every time we had time off, I was writing episodes of various things, and I wrote some long form pieces. And then finally I just said, I don't want to be in a room with 12 people anymore. I want to do something on my own. So I wrote 3 chapters in an outline, because that's what they told me you had to do in order to get a book deal, of a book, a story of 2 friends, 2 girls who meet on a beach in Atlantic City, and it follows their friendship over 30 years. And my cousin Max is here, by the way. My cousin Max Rubinowitz and his wife Sylvia. So they're going to know what I'm talking about here. But my mother was one of 9 children, and her sisters were her best friends. Max's mom was one of the sisters. And so my cousin, who was the daughter of one of the sisters, and I became extremely close over the years, even though we never lived in the same city. And I remember she lived in Miami, so we would go and walk on that beach, and then years later I lived in LA, we would walk on those beaches, and I thought, one day she said to me, when we were in our 20s, when one of us dies, I hope it's me first, because I couldn't live on a planet that didn't have you on it. And of course, I immediately thought, ooh, I have to write about that. This is the perils of being friends with a writer. They steal everything you say. I write it down. So I tried to sell it, 3 chapters in an outline of this book, and nobody wanted to buy it. I had a television agent who introduced me to a publishing agent, and she said, you know, I've taken this book out, and everyone says they like your writing, but they just don't think a story about 2 little girls who meet on a beach is commercial. So what do you want to do? And I said, well, you tell me what to do. She said, do you have any ideas that are commercial? I said, well, my first husband was in the mailroom at MCA Universal, and all of the guys who were in his mailroom class made it big in the business. And I could write about that. She said, oh, yeah, just write an outline of that. I bet I can sell that. So I did. I wrote this very trashy Hollywood novel. My son is 43. He's still not allowed to read. And that book became a New York Times bestseller, and Aaron Spelling bought it as a miniseries. And then all of a sudden, the book about the 2 little girls on a beach, everyone said, what a great idea. This is such a good idea. We want this. So then I was able to write Beaches, which is why Beaches turned out to be my second book. But then the rest of that story is actually kind of funny, because by then I was dating Steve Dart, whom I have now been married for 32 years. That's how long ago it was. And he said, do you know Bette Midler? And I said, no. And he said, I know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows Bette Midler. And he said, get it to her, because this is the perfect piece for her. So I called a friend who called a friend, and we got the 3 chapters in an outline to her, and her agent called me on a Sunday. For some reason that stuck in my mind, because I thought, wow, she must really want this. It's a Sunday. And he said she'd like to meet with you. So I had seen her act. I had seen that very trashy persona that she plays on stage, which is nothing like who she really is. And I went to her house, and she came in. She was wearing a long shirt and tights, and her hair was loose, and she had on no makeup. And she's tiny. She's my size, and the first thing she wanted to do was stand back to back and see who was taller. She is, but she didn't want me to tell you that. And she said, someday I'm going to make this into a movie. it took many years after that because her career kind of took a dive. She had made a film prophetically entitled Jinxed, and and her career was in a trough. But within a few years, she was making some films at Paramount. Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg were there, and they then moved to Disney. They took her with them because her movies were so successful, and she said, I want to make this movie and I want to produce it. And by then she had a production company called All Girls Productions, and so she was also the producer of Beaches, the movie. Am I kind of like you just winding up? I'm sorry you asked.
This is so busy. Do you have any questions for the crowd so far? Yes, sir.
Well, you said you had some homework to do, and you said the show opens in 2 weeks, and you're back there rewriting it, apparently. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening and why it's getting, I mean, it seems awfully late in the game to be rewriting.
No, because it's a new show. I mean, yeah, one of the writers I was working with on the other show told me that Mel Brooks said, even on opening night, he was standing off stage, handing them pages, you sit there. I mean, there is some Actors Equity rule that says you have to freeze the show. I'm not exactly sure when, opening night or something like that. But even during previews, we'll be fixing and changing because that's what this process is. Thank God for Signature Theater. Thank all of you for supporting it. Because the atmosphere here is very, very open and creative, and there's no fear in the room. Eric Schaefer is so warm that he really enables you to say, this is going to sound crazy, but could we try it? And he'll say, go for it, and then we try it. And my last show opened on Broadway with no out-of-town tryout, and the critics hated us. The audiences loved us, but we were at Studio 54. Donna Murphy was our star. She was nominated for a Tony, but she didn't want to leave New York because she had a 5-year-old who was in school. And Todd Hames, the artistic director of Roundabout, said, let's just be bold and do it here. Which was great because we got to have her and a fabulous Broadway cast. On the other hand, we couldn't do what we're doing now. We just simply couldn't do it. We didn't have the freedom. We were able to have 5 weeks of rehearsal here. It's like being on a college campus for us because we all live within a block of each other. So we're constantly working, and it's the good news, not the bad news. I mean, I'm turning 70 in a month, so it's a little, I'm a little old to still be staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning doing rewrites, but thank heaven I'm able to. I love it. They always, my husband's friends will say to me, when are you going to stop doing this? And I say, when they pull the computer from my cold dead.
In the back, yes.
So the movie, I guess, came out in '88, if I remember. How did it take so long to turn it into a play?
That's a good question. It didn't even occur to me, actually. And then in 1984, actually, was when I made the deal with Disney, and they did the movie. And in those days, unlike now, the studios weren't yet rating their catalogs to turn every damn movie into a musical. So in my contract, which I looked at after I was so in love with writing people in the picture, I said, I'm going to look at my Disney contract, and I realized that I owned the stage rights. And I thought, oh my goodness. How about this for a gift that falls out of the sky? And so that was the beginning,
And how did the team get assembled with the other writers?
Jennifer Maloney, who's our New York producer, was somebody I knew, and she said, there's only one musical I've always dreamed of doing, and it's Beaches. And, Mike Stoller, with whom I wrote People in the Picture, is a very famous composer. I think he's one of the greatest tunesmiths ever, since Irving Berlin, maybe. And Mike just turned 80 last year. So she takes me in to meet David Austin, who he's 36 now, so he's 29 years old. And I say to her, Jennifer, what are you doing? She says, no, come on, you have to hear it. So I go over to his apartment and I sit down, and he is so nervous he won't even play the songs for me. He's recorded them. So he can sit there watching me listen to them. I said, this is such a mistake. Because what if I hate them? I'm going to be so embarrassed. And he had some friends come in and record these songs. And they were so good. I thought, oh, I'm just flattered because he wrote 4 spec songs. They can't be really this good. So I sent them to some friends. I said, am I crazy, or are these really fabulous? And they said, you are crazy, but they are really fabulous. So I just thought, what the hell? Why not do this? Why not write with somebody brand new who brings so much fire and so much enthusiasm to the party? Okay, let's do it. And in the beginning it was a little stutter step kind of thing. You know, we laugh about it now. Some of the lyrics that we wrote, the songs that we wrote were just pretty bad. And little by little we got into a rhythm, and I didn't want to write the libretto by myself this time. So one of my close friends from Carnegie, a friend of over 50 years, is a playwright. So I called him and I said, will you do this with me? He said, sure. So then we had what we called camp beaches, where everybody came to my house, and they stayed there for a week. And my husband is a wonderful cook, and that was his job. He was kind of camp counselor and made the dinner. Sometimes that was the only time we came downstairs. We sat in my office. Sometimes we wouldn't quit till 11 o'clock at night. And little by little, we had assembled this musical. And then we had to figure out what we were going to do next. And I said to my agent, when's the next time Eric Schaefer's going to be in New York? And so he said, I'll find out. So he said, he's not going to be here for a while. I said, then make an appointment with him for us to come down there and see if he'll give us an hour. And he called me back. He said, yes, on such and such a date. I was in New York. I live in the Central Coast of California. I was in New York. I took David, Tom, me, piano player, and one girl singer. We got on the train. We came down. We had lunch at Busboys and Poets. We came over. We walked into the shed where we're now rehearsing, and we said, da-da-da-da-da-da. Here's our musical, and here we are. I mean, it sounds easy, believe me, it wasn't, but we fell in love with him. He fell in love with us, and we knew that this theater had a reputation for being the best place to, quote, grow a musical. So that's what we're doing.
Questions from the crowd? Yes, Kendall.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated with the writing process, especially when things become so big and book now living out play. You maybe gave a little hint of this before, but could you speak a little bit more about how you view the process of writing characters that are round, likable, believable, that we connect with, but what I really want to know is how do you write such that the characters in the book connect with each other?
I have no idea. I wish I knew the answer to that. I mean, I can only write from what I know and feel and how I relate to people. And in both of my shows, and it took David Austin some getting used to. At the end of the people in the picture, the grandmother is dying, and her daughter and her granddaughter are at her bedside, and all the ghosts are there from her past. She was an actress, a Yiddish theater actress, and one of the Yiddish theater actors says to the daughter's a comedy writer, he says, it's hard to do what you do for a living. You're a hardworking girl. And one of the other ghosts says to her, your mother told us that you know Neil Simon. And the mother from her deathbed says, no, I didn't. I said she's no Neil Simon. This is a deathbed scene. But Max can tell you about our family, that even when we're sitting shiva, we laugh. You know, I mean, that to me, and that's the reason that I wrote that show. And so I can tell you about me that I try to bring humor, and I think that the reason people relate to beaches is because if you're going to go, let it be with your best friend there making you laugh. And it's actually a story that I just put in the program notes. My best friend in college was a beautiful actress named Caroline McWilliams. She was on Guiding Light, and she was on Soap and Benson, and we were super close. And about 4 years ago, she came down with, that's not the way to describe it, she was very ill, and she had multiple myeloma. And the friends made a grid on which we would each take turns several days a month of being there. And in the end, she really knew that it was the very end for her. And I was sitting next to her bed, and she said to me, "This is hard. It's not as hard as comedy." You know, that's how I connect with people. So that's what I write.
Now, you mentioned earlier Gary Marshall going through your script and saying this is funny, this isn't.
Yeah.
Are there rules to being funny?
Well, you know, he tried to teach me how to write a joke, and essentially it was to, you know, the process that he told me was explore every aspect. I remember because we were sitting at lunch and he was saying, you're going to write a joke about this salt shaker, you turn it upside down, you spill the salt out, you hold it in your hand. You know, that you look at every aspect of a situation, and pretty soon you kind of learn how to turn things in your mind so that they're funny. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's teachable, but he kind of taught it to me.
And you yourself, it sounds like, if I'm understanding, that you're self-taught as a writer, essentially, right? Or
Yes, pretty much. I mean, I took the same writing English classes that everybody, but you know, my family was very funny. My brother Elliot, who had the hardware store, was probably the funniest one. He should have been the comedy writer. But my mother was also very funny, and I always tell a story about how, again, we had no money. One day I saw her putting maybe $20 in an envelope for the rabbi. I said, "Ma, that's so much money." She said, "Well, last year I said to him, Rabbi, I gave him 10. She says, last year I gave him 10. I said to him, Rabbi, next year if I live in Duval, I'll give you 20. So my luck, I live. Now, how could the daughter of that woman not go up to be a comedy?
yes, Rachel.
So I've been thinking a lot about saving Mr. Banks during this. And I just wonder if it's hard for you. I'm sure you have a real emotional connection to your characters. And if it's hard sometimes seeing them portrayed either in the musical or in the movie, maybe it's not really what you had in mind, like your soul out there on stage.
Well, there's two stories about that. And the first one is that I adapted a novel of Sidney Sheldon's once as a miniseries. And someone introduced me to him one day, and he said, "So, you're adapting my novel?" And I thought, oh, God, what is he going to say? He said, "Do whatever you want." He said, "My version of the story's in the library." And I thought, oh, what a healthy attitude that is. But then when they were shooting the movie, which I did not write, I wrote the novel, and then I knew enough about Hollywood that there'd be 7 people after me, so it was never going to be the Gary Marshall version. Did I already say this? No, I said it the other night. Gary Marshall, when they hired him, coincidentally, 22 years later to direct Beaches, he said, "You know, when you got a writer, a director, a producer, a studio, and a star, none of you are making the same picture." So everybody brings something to it when you're in a collaboration. And when they wrote a scene in the movie that was at Bergdorf Goodman, they recreated the entire first floor of Bergdorf Goodman in a studio. Why they didn't just come to New York and shoot there in the middle of the night is another story. But I was on the set that day, and they were shooting a scene that where the 2 women fight, and it was a cat fight, and I would never write that. I'm an ardent feminist. And afterwards, Bette came over to me, and she said, "So what'd you think?" And she could read my face that I didn't love it. And she said, "Oh, Iris, do you get angry every time we shoot a scene that isn't in your book?" And I looked around, and there was Gary, 22 years later, as he says, and this entire group of people who were employed because one day I had this idea about my cousin. And Bette Midler, my favorite star, and I said what I thought, which is, "Honey, You're starring in a movie of my book. How bad could it be? You know, I mean, they kept to the spirit of it. It was not the book. And the show is not going to be the book either, because Tom is writing it with me, Eric is directing it, and he says, I think she should be so-and-so. And somehow we all meld together and find the best. Cece.
Did you have any input on the screenplay? Because there are some substantial differences.
It's actually it's a funny story also that Gary, when he was hired, looked at the screenplay and didn't like it. And his daughter, Kathleen, who runs a theater in LA, said, what's wrong with these people? Didn't they read the book? So he said, so what's wrong with it? We'll go to lunch. She'll tell me. So I said, they took this out, they put that in. I think it would be better if they did this. And then there was a Writers Guild strike. And Mary Agnes Donahue, who had written the most recent draft, was unable to rewrite the script. So Gary Marshall, the director, rewrote it. So the draft you saw that he shot was one that was written by him. So I did feel that I had some input because I was able to say to him, you know, this makes no sense, this is real, this is better. So, yeah. But again, one of the things Jennifer Maloney said about the show that we're doing now, she said it's the same characters on different days. And I think that's a really good way to describe it. I wanted the logo to be not your mother's beaches. Because it does. It has a spirit of its own, a feeling of its own. But I promise you, you will know Cece, and you will know in the movie it was Hillary, in the book was Bertie. These two girls are stupendous. They're just amazing. They sing great. They look right. They both dance amazingly. And they're very. The other thing is they're very open. Again, I owe this to Eric. I think they're fearless about trying things, and it's because of the atmosphere that he creates in the rehearsal room. Everyone's very comfortable there. No one. We have two little tiny girls. How old are those girls?
Like
8 or
9, I think. Yeah.
8 or 9. They come bopping in. They have they're not intimidated in the least because it's a safe place to be. So.
Other questions? Okay, that's right here.
So, you've mentioned that the Broadway producers, so what are the implications of having a Broadway producer?
Well, that's a very good question. At the moment, not much. You know, I think it will all depend on how we do, and then if it's great, they'll be very interested. They're helping us out here financially, and you know, it's like anything else. If they love us, then we all move ahead together. If not, it's over.
Yes, Steve. How did you hear of Eric and Signature? How did that come about?
Oh, it's everybody in the musical theater world knows about it. It's very well known. I've seen other shows. I saw his production of Follies. I know actors who have worked with him. David Loud, the musical director, is a good friend of mine. He worked on People in the Picture. So Florence Lacey is a friend of Tom's. You know, I mean, I had never seen a show here until this year. I saw Gypsy and Crossing. But oh no, he's very well known. I mean, it's a very, very small group, the Broadway A-list directors that she is. So those are the guys you go to first.
So jumping back decades ago when you were writing the book, Beaches, this is kind of an annoying question, did you suspect that it was going to turn out to be something special when you were writing it, that it was going to become the hit that it was?
If you think about that, you can go insane. No, I'm a storyteller, and that's what I wanted to do. I've written 9 books, and I always just find a story that means a lot to me personally, and this was one of them. And no, I had no clue. I mean, I'm always shocked and amazed when, you know, a woman will come up to me with her friend and say, "She's my Beaches." And my son married an Israeli. My daughter-in-law said that the first book she read in English she saw the movie with Hebrew subtitles. I would like to see that. What that so, I mean, those things always blow me away.
Yeah.
Can't think about that.
Right. You've written for several different mediums, from stage to film and novels, and lyric writing. Is there one that you prefer?
No, this is my late in life career change, even though I did it in college, and this is the one I prefer. I have no intention of ever writing another novel. I only want to work in musical theater. One of my partners, Artie Butler, said, it's because we have to scrape you off the ceiling when we're working on songs, because I have so much fun. Music just elevates the whole experience, and so I love it. And I'm very fortunate, to be this age and to have a very nice life. So my husband says to me, write whatever you want, and that's a gift.
It is. Is lyric writing difficult, or does it come naturally for you?
Well, if you ask some of the composers I've worked with, they'd say, yes, it's difficult for her. I don't know. It doesn't feel difficult. I love it because I love listening to the music. My husband has said to me, because sometimes it goes both ways. Sometimes I'll send lyrics to the composer, and sometimes they'll send music to me. And that's kind of like doing the crossword puzzle, filling in the words. But when I get the music, my husband said to me, don't you get tired of hearing that song over and over and over? You keep going back and hearing it again. I say, I can't wait to hear it again. That's how exciting it is to me. So.
Great. Other questions? Yes, in the back, I'm sure.
Yeah. Do you have any like when you encounter writer's block, or do you have any tricks that help you get over that? Or
I don't believe in writer's block. I never even say those words except right now. If you say you're blocked, you will be. I'm a big believer in that. That you create it. What I do, I'm kind of dull. I have no hobbies. I live in Pebble Beach, California, and I don't play golf. The only person who lives there who does not play golf. I don't play tennis. I have grandchildren. They're my only hobby. They're my only other interest. But I go into my office every day and I sit there. And sometimes what I write is so bad I should have writer's block just to not. But now, when I worked in television, you're in the room, you close the door, they say we want, 12 pages by 4 o'clock, and there has to be 4 jokes a page. Bye, and they close the door, and there you are. At least when I get to the end of a workday now, if I hate it, I can throw it away. In those days, I was reading it to the cue card guy who was putting it up in front of Cher. So the trick is just to sit in that chair. There's so many temptations. Get away from the internet. Get away from the refrigerator. Make yourself sit there, because eventually something will come. That's the trick. Do I always say, oh, wow, I have the greatest ideas in the world. I can't wait to get in there. Absolutely not. I just don't go anywhere. So I'm kind of dull.
Writers that you admire?
Well, interestingly, Terrence McNally is a playwright who I admire. And the novelists would be Philip Roth. I've read every word he's written, and Sholem Aleichem. There are more, but
Right.
Those are my faves.
Okay, did I see a hand? I'm losing my mind. No, okay. Losing my mind. You mentioned earlier in your career, you reached a point working in television where you said, no, I'd rather not work with 12 people.
Right.
But you kind of ended up doing this now.
I know.
So, different
But
phases.
there's something very interesting, too, about the theater, and that is the Dramatists Guild says that the writer gets the last word on everything. In television and in film, if they don't like what you wrote, they say, bye, we're bringing in so-and-so. But here, my first experience of it was when we were in rehearsal for the People in the Picture, and Donna Murphy, just the most brilliant actress, Broadway actress, looked up and said, with Iris's approval, I'd like to say the following. And I thought, this is great. I love this. And it's it's what's so great about the theater. I mean, Eric will say, Iris, I want to cut this. What do you think? Is it okay? And I'm like, he's asking me that question? Wow. I mean, it's very nice. It's a whole other ballgame.
It's great. It's great. When the show, once you're done, once the show's frozen.
You'll have to drag me screaming from the theater.
What's next?
I have a bunch of projects lined up, and they are all musical theater.
Really?
Yeah, they all have music in them. One of them is a play with music. And should I reveal what it is?
If you're allowed to.
Well, yeah, 'cause I'm doing it myself, so I guess I can. In 1970-something, Universal Studios hired me to write a film biography of Judy Holliday. And there was very little written about her. So they sent me out into her life, essentially, to interview all of the people that knew her and were still around. And one of those people was Jerry Mulligan, a late great jazz saxophone player. And he and his wife and Steve and I became extremely close friends to the point that when he died in '96, I spoke at his funeral. And I have a piece about the 9 years when Judy Holliday and Jerry's lives crossed. So it's got jazz, it's got those two amazing characters, and the best part is when they were together, they wanted to write a musical. And I have the rights to all the songs they wrote together, which I'll be using in the piece. So I'm madly in love with this piece because they were both such amazing characters. Both very funny, but extremely smart. And the songs are fantastic. So.
Are you writing that for a specific theater, or?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. But you may not be rid of me yet.
So I read the book last week, and the early chapters, the summer stock stuff, was nothing has really changed. But you mentioned earlier that you spent time doing summer stock. Do you have any experiences from that you care to share?
Well, just that it was a great learning place. I worked at the White Barn Theater outside of Pittsburgh, and then I worked for 2 summers at the Surflight Summer Theater on Long Beach Island, Beach Haven, New Jersey. And we did 12 musicals in 12 weeks each time. So I know so many old musicals that I listen to Sirius Satellite, Seth Rudetsky, and I play Name That Tune with myself because I know so many old shows. It was a great learning ground for me. And as I said, most of my parts were pretty small. Had some bigger ones the second year. But that was when I really super fell in love with my first show that I ever saw. I told you my family had no money. My father drove an old beat-up station wagon, and when I was 14, he took us. We went to New York from Pittsburgh, and somehow, I don't know how he did it, he got tickets to 2 shows. So the first night I saw Ethel Merman and Gypsy. And the second night I saw West Side Story, and that did it. It was a dead duck.
Goodness, that's amazing.
Yeah, but the summer stock theater experience was fantastic. You have to get a show. I mean, this is luxurious.
Yeah.
5 weeks, so we had 5 days. I mean, it was just crazy, but somehow we did it. And I loved every minute of it. I was a dancer who could sing, not a singer. That's how they hired you. So.
Okay. Was theater what you wanted to do from the very beginning? Was that what you wanted to do as a
I was a
child?
child actress in Pittsburgh. When I was 5, my sister took me to Pittsburgh Playhouse, and I auditioned. That's where the scene comes from about getting the part and not getting the part. I was the kid who got the part, and it was in a children's play, Pittsburgh Playhouse. My sister is still very shy, and I wasn't, so she was kind of my Mama Rose. She would take me, and I acted at the Pittsburgh Playhouse for all those years up to getting into Carnegie.
Wow, amazing.
So, yeah.
Amazing. Questions from the crowd? Quiet all of a sudden. Excellent. So you wrote, okay, I just lost my train of thought completely. I'm going to turn to the cards. This is embarrassing. You are reading a book you wrote or that's been published, you're seeing a show that you've written, you're seeing a film that you've written, what's going on in your mind as you're seeing what's...
It depends. By the time I got to People in Picture being running, I didn't like the first act anymore, so I would go down into the VIP lounge at Studio 54 and come up for Act 2. But I was just telling somebody the story that years ago I got to meet. In fact, it was Jerry Mulligan who introduced me to the wonderful writer Herb Gardner. We went to see a Herb Gardner play, and afterwards we went to dinner with him, and Herb Gardner, Jerry said, Iris just had her first novel published. And Herb Gardner said, really? And how much of this first novel do you actually like? And I said, about 2 paragraphs. And he said, really, that much? So, it's just so hard. I mean, right now, I have absolutely no objectivity about the show at all, because we're so into it, we're so enmeshed in it, night and day. It's just hard to judge it all.
I have to say, story after story, it's amazing the people that fell into your path. It's unreal.
It is true.
What a life.
You ain't heard nothing yet.
Tell us more.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is true. Other people have said that to me and the choreographer was here. Crystal?
Yeah.
Amazingly. Love the timing, and I have to say that I wanted to be a successful writer, and I worked very hard. I can't say it all. It did not fall into my lap.
Right.
When you are working on a TV show, some of the sitcoms I worked on, we would be there at 10 o'clock in the morning.
And I'm sure there were day jobs when first moving out there, or...
Oh, please. I worked I was a hostess at a condominium in the Hollywood Hills, and I worked at the desk of a beauty parlor, and I was an usher at a place called the Preview House that's screened TV pilots. They were actually testing commercials, and you'd have to walk up and down the aisles and make sure everyone was turning their dials, and a million jobs. But it all got me where I wanted to go.
Yeah. And what do you get out of it from writing? What does it do for you, do to you?
People always say to me, you're so disciplined. You sit in that chair every day, and as I said, I'm not really disciplined. I just don't do anything else. I mean, that's what I do. That's what I love to do. I love telling stories. And I love going to theater. I think theater, someone once said that they heard Mike Nichols leaving the theater. He said, it's the best thing we have. And I agree. Now my daughter who went to Tisch, she was a dramatic writing major, probably saw what a pain in the neck writing was and decided to move to directing. And she's now working in New York. And I go to New York and we see everything together. And she feels the same way. I've created another theater geek. I'm so proud.
Advice for those who may want to pursue writing.
Keep writing. Keep reading. See everything, because it all informs your work. Especially, when I was a novelist, I used to say, read every book you can get your hands on, and I still do that because, you're learning from the best teachers, and they don't have to be in the room with you to teach you. You just have to, light up your Kindle.
Were you an avid reader as a child, or did that come later?
I was.
That's great. That's great. Questions from the crowd? Yes, Rachel.
I have a silly question. Does Bette Midler know about the musical?
She does. In fact, she said...
She coming to see it?
Cher coming?
Bette knows about the musical. In fact, at one point we were still wondering who we were going to cast. I said to her, can Sophie sing? Her daughter. And she said, as a matter of fact, she can. Oh, God, that was probably a big mistake on my part. That would be a real trap to fall into. Sophie looks exactly like her.
Oh, wow.
So, you think anybody would be expecting the movie if Sophie was the star? Yes, Bette and I have stayed in touch. I went to see her in LEE last. She went to see People in Picture and loved it. And who knows, we'll probably end up doing something.
How about Barbara Hershey?
I don't see Barbara Hershey. I think she's still, I know she was in Black Swan.
Right.
But
Wasn't she in
She's in Chelsea.
Yes.
I was wondering if you knew she would come see it.
Oh, I'm not in touch with her, so I don't know.
Missing, you had a question?
Yes, I know, like as a kid, I watched Beaches, that was my introduction to the book, and I know me and my sister watched it, and we just connected to the characters so much. And it was as if, these friends are sisters, and they played off of each other, they fed off of each other in the same way I kind of did my sister. And so I wondered, was there elements of your family that's in the story, or you kind of alluded to elements of yourself and your own experiences?
My cousin was, this is the part where I say, she was 2 years older than I am, and she would always say, "A year and 10 months," she'd yell out for me. And she got married at 19, something, Sandy, yeah, and moved, she was living in Florida, and she moved to Cleveland with her new husband, and she had 2 daughters, and I was living in Pittsburgh, so I would get on what her husband called a big dog, the Greyhound bus, and I would go to Cleveland, and I would just think her life was so wonderful. I'd think, gee, this is just so perfect, and her lovely apartment, and her perfect husband. And then she would come to see my life, when I graduated, and she'd come to LA, and it was always insane, and she would come on the set of shows I was working on, and she just thought my life was so perfect, and it was kind of what one lacked, the other made up for. And she'll be here actually. She's coming. My 70th birthday is March 3rd, and I'm having a bunch of friends come on February 28th to the theater, and she will be here, so you can all meet her.
Other questions? Yes, Bob.
This is dangerous for the ardent feminist, but you said you were married for 32 years.
Yes.
What does your husband do besides support you? I don't mean money-wise, support you.
You mean what does he do for a living?
Is he in show business?
No. Actually, it's interesting. Without, again, at the risk of boring you, his mother was a movie star. My mother-in-law, Jane Bryan was her name. I don't know how many of you are old movie buffs, but she was Betty Davis's protege, and she always played Betty Davis. Betty Davis was always so tough, and then she had this beautiful little sister who said, "Let's not do that." That was my mother-in-law. And after she'd made 12 films at Warner's, she walked into Jack Warner's office one day and said, "At 22, I'm leaving." And he said, "That's ridiculous. What could you possibly do that's as glamorous as the life you have here?" And she said, "I'm marrying Justin Dart." That's my father-in-law. And Jack Warner said, "Bye. You're right. It is more glamorous." And she married my father. So he had show business in his blood. But he is a family financial planner, and he's kind of the Don of the Dart family, and takes care of everybody's needs financially. So that's what he does.
Other questions? In the very back, yes.
Did they ever talk about doing I'll Be There as a movie?
That's a good question.
The reason I wrote I'll Be There was because they wanted to make a sequel to Beaches. And then, since I'll Be There was about crazy Cece raising the kid, and Bet made a movie at Disney called Stella Dallas that failed, everybody just said, that's going to be a real bad idea. Let's just keep moving. And that's what happened to I'll Be There.
So how long, 30 years the book's been around now? Probably
85. So
yeah, almost 29 years now.
Yeah, the same age as my daughter. I was very pregnant at the book party. She was born about a week after the book came out. So it was a big month for me.
What do the characters mean to you 30 years later? Now that you're spending more time with them again, what place do they hold in your heart?
The place they hold in my heart, it's actually a good question. My girlfriends have carried me through this life. Some of the things that we haven't talked about, I've had some serious bad things happen in my life, some disasters. My first husband was murdered by a robber who came into his house when my son and I were away. And, I've lost friends, and I've had big career ups and downs. And my girlfriends have dragged me through this life. I mean, when I was marrying Steve Dart, interestingly, it was at someone's house, some friend's house, and I didn't know it, but I had mono, and I was not feeling well, and I said to Caroline, I said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it down that aisle. She said, honey, you're going to make it down that aisle if I have to carry you down there myself. So that's who they have always been to me. One of my best friends is also a writer for theater, and we're on the phone every day, and she just gets all the things I'm going through, and I don't know how I would have survived this life without my friends. And that's what I see up there when, you know, I mean, I don't want to give anything away, but in some of the scenes, I have to leave the room because I'm crying, because it's so emotional. And what we've done is we've used little girls and then teenage girls to show the generations of them growing up, and sometimes they're all on the stage together, and I think it's so moving to see how friends get each other at, and that's what I relate to the most about this piece.
It's beautiful.
And I'm glad that I wrote about friends because, as this young woman said, and as we all know, you can't make it through, you know, Beth said it, you've got to have friends. That's the message.
Thank you so much for coming tonight.